Well, hi there, food friends. It is Kevin.
It sure is, and I'm Ralph behind the camera.
Oh, and we're in a weird place, aren't we?
You know why?
Why?
Because you told me you were finally going to answer some of our friends out there, their request for your seasoned salt, and I thought, well, this is a record I just picked up today, and what we're doing is one step beyond regular salt.
Wow, you really thought this through. Way more than I did. Well, you know what? We did a segment, I don't know, a few weeks ago. I think it might have been a beef stew or something. And anyways, I used my own seasoned salt, which
you always have handy.
I always have handy by the stove. And a number of people said, "Ooh, can you share the recipe?" So I said, "Of course." So that's what we're going to do. So this is, we're going to make a little batch of seasoned salt. Now the great thing about it is there's wonderful seasoned salts out there already, which you can buy. And if you might have one that you like, there's a couple of them that I buy to have handy because sometimes I don't always have a batch of mine, and they're great.
Yeah, I like yours in particular though because there's a certain sweetness to yours that I think adds something to the flavor.
And I think a lot depends too on how you're using your seasoned salt, what you're putting it on.
Sure.
Because sometimes it comes through more with one particular type of dish than another. Now, let's talk about salt for a minute, Ralph, and I know it's one of your favorite subjects because Ralph likes salt, things salted.
I'm sensitive to salt, but I can tell something. Kevin always says, if Ralph thinks it's salty, it must really be salty.
Right,
So.
and that's and salt is part of seasoning, and so for people who aren't salt averse for health reasons or things like that, when you put salt in food, the right amount. Not over salting, but when salt is done properly, it really enhances the flavors of the food, and that's what salt's supposed to do.
And contrary to popular myth, I do not put salt on potato chips.
No, he does not. So you know what? I got all kinds of salt here. I got kosher salt, and I got regular, old-fashioned table salt. I got salt from the sea. I got real coarse kosher salt. And you know what? They're all salt. Mm-hmm. Okay? They're all, chemically, they're all salt, and they're all salty.
Wait, do these all go in your special mix?
They don't. But I just wanted to say you could use any kind of salt for this.
Because I was going to say, you have that pink salt sometimes, that Himalayan salt.
That's in a grinder.
Right. I mean, if you were just going to show all the different salts.
But these are just what I have in the cupboard really handy.
Okay.
But any of these salts will be fine, but I'll be honest with you, I like to use a fine salt in making the seasoned salt, not something that's coarse grained. So, the kosher salts, this is a coarse sea salt. Good old-fashioned table salt is I'll use, or you can get a finely ground kosher salt is good too. Here's the basis of my seasoned salt. I start with celery salt, okay? Now you can buy celery salt already mixed, and celery salt is just a combination of regular salt, okay, and ground celery seed, which is something I also have on hand because I love celery seed, and I particularly like to use it in dressings. And I don't always want the whole celery seed, but sometimes I want it ground. So you could do a 3-part salt to 1 part celery seed, and you'd make yourself some celery salt. But since I already have some, and this just may be easier, we're just going to start with this. So I'm going to start with 1/4 cup of celery salt. Okay?
And I have to say, too, one thing about Kevin's specially homemade seasoned salt is that you don't taste any of these things in particular. It's one of those things where it adds a lot of the right flavors, but you never feel like, it's, you're tasting, like I don't taste celery salt per se, but I always enjoy using it on certain foods.
But it has a wonderful, I don't know if you can smell it from where you're standing, but you can get the celery.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But that gets mixed in. I mean, I think that gets not lost, but it kind of gets integrated with some of the other things that you do add to it.
So now we're going to use just regular paprika.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to put in 4 teaspoons of paprika. paprika. This is kind of a regular, kind of a sweet paprika. They have hot paprika. They have smoked paprika out there.
Can you tell folks what paprika is?
Paprika is just ground. It's a ground red pepper, ground pimento.
But isn't it used more in Eastern European?
Yeah,
cooking?
you see it a lot in Hungarian cooking and some Slavic cooking. Yeah, garlic powder. Okay, so this is just ground garlic. Again, this is what's so fun about this. 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, by the way. Okay. What's so fun about this is something you can make your own. Maybe you don't like garlic. Leave it out. Don't put it in. That's fine. Put something else in that you like. Maybe there's an herb.
Maybe onion powder.
Maybe onion powder, which we put in too, by the way. Okay. Now, so paprika, garlic powder, celery salt. The next thing is curry. Now, I'm using Madras curry powder. Curry is itself basically a blend of seasonings, much like we're creating.
And different each time, really.
And different. And every curry is different depending on who makes it. And there are what they call sweet curries. And then there are the hot curries, right, Ralph? Because we like Indian food. And we've certainly experimented with a lot of different curries. And so, again, if you want your seasoned salt to be a little on the spicier side, use a hot curry. This is a sweet curry, and I'm going to use 2 teaspoons here of curry powder. And again, you don't taste the curry per se, it's just kind of in the background. Okay, 2 teaspoons of curry powder. Now, onion powder. I find this that I get, it's made with roasted or toasted onions, which is what gives it sort of that real pretty
deeper flavor,
golden color, and I think it also gives it. But if you don't have this, or you just want to use regular onion powder, which is generally just white, go ahead.
Lighter color.
But I like this toasted onion powder.
Yeah, it's a little deeper.
So 2 teaspoons of that. Now, finally, we're going to get to an herb, ground thyme. I'm going to put in a teaspoon of ground thyme here.
What are you going to end up with as far as quantity? Because I noticed you're putting mostly 2.
Yeah, we might be up around a half a cup.
Okay.
Altogether. And I don't I don't make a ton of this at one time because I like it to kind of be fresh.
And a little goes a long way.
Right. Okay, so we've got a teaspoon of thyme. I'm going to put a teaspoon of mustard, dry mustard in. Again, there are a lot of different mustards out there.
This is a first for me. I've loved Kevin's seasoned salt, but I've never known what went into it. So I would never have guessed that dry mustard went into it. But I think that probably, like kick up and accentuate some of the other flavors?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we put in some parsley. I'm going to put in 3 teaspoons of dried parsley. I'll be honest with you. This is almost a very mild kind of a thing. Dried parsley doesn't have a lot of flavor. But you know what? It gives a little bit of a color to it. And I just sort of like the way it looks. Now, finally, I get this at the bulk food store. This is dextrose. Dextrose is a sweetener. It's a natural sweetener. If you didn't have this, you can use sugar, okay? But what I like about dextrose is it's fine, like powder. Look at this.
Oh, so you don't put sugar, you use dextrose?
I use dextrose. Before I realized they had dextrose at the bulk food store, I would use sugar. I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons of dextrose. Okay?
Dextrose. I loved his miniseries on Showtime. Oh, no, wait, that was Dexter. Okay.
Okay, now here is where you can make a decision. I have some cayenne pepper here. Cayenne pepper is ground hot peppers, right, in a powder form. It kind of looks like paprika. It's not quite as dark.
But hotter.
But it's hotter. Now, if you wanted to make your seasoned salt hot, you could put some cayenne in there. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't bother. So I'm going to leave it out this time, right. But now we're just, here's all we're doing. You want to really mix this up. Make sure there's no lumps or no clumps. There were a few little lumps in that mustard, so I want to
break it up, break it down. So could people even put this in like a little?
You could put it in a little shaker jar.
No, I was thinking like one of those things that grind up seeds or grind up, like what's it called?
Oh, here, I've got one right here. It's actually a coffee grinder. I use it to grind spices because...
Yeah, like a spice grinder. So people could actually use that if they wanted it more finely ground.
Yes.
But you can also do it by hand, obviously.
So, you just want to get it all good and mixed up. And then, after it's mixed, you can give it a little taste. It's going to be salty, but then it's supposed to be.
Right. You have to imagine this on, some eggs or mixed in some sour cream for some dips. Can I try it? What do you think it needs? Or do you think it needs anything? Just a tiny bit.
Yeah, because it's really salty. But you can get the... Yeah.
I think a little more dextrose. I'm not getting the sweetness I usually get from...
Okay.
From your...
Well, I'm going to put in another teaspoon of dextrose because we're going to make a little sweeter version here.
Yeah.
Again, you can experiment, but
and like
these are the basics.
Your stuff is usually not so sweet that it, No,
and you don't want it to be. It's salt, so it shouldn't be sweet.
But the sweetness usually accentuates the saltiness in a good way. But I wasn't getting any sweetness on that last little taste test I did.
And like I said, the biggest thing that I go from time to time is whether or not I want to make it hot. But I'm going to leave it at this.
Sometimes a touch of hot can push out the flavors too.
So you can always add the cayenne, and then I've got this little jar here that I keep near the stove. Again, you could put it in a shaker jar if you wanted to.
But in this kind of a vessel, you can just pinch.
Yeah, it's handy.
Use it for getting a little.
And there it is. So there is our homemade seasoned salt. So you can see you probably have a lot of this stuff in your cupboard, in your spice cabinet.
In your pantry.
Use your spices, folks. And they don't last forever, by the way. So once a year I go through my spice cabinet where I have a cabinet just for spices. And I go through, and if I haven't used stuff in over a year, or sometimes you buy a can of spices or a jar of spice for a particular dish and then you never use it again. It does lose its potency over time. So
what are you saying? Throw it out?
Yeah.
Not me. I just double it up. I just use twice as much.
That's Ralph. But they do fade after a while.
Okay.
But that's just the nature of it. And anyways, making your own seasoned salt is easy and it's fun. And what I like about it, you can make it to your own tastes. So like I said, if you like it a little bit more garlicky, or you like it a little bit more oniony,
or hot,
or sweet, or more curry-ish, or maybe more herbal, right? If you wanted to put some other herbs. The only really herbs I have in here are like thyme and parsley, but you could certainly put in, a little basil, a little oregano, a little marjoram. All those would be good herbs de Provence. So
I think Lawry's is at the door. They want you to come work for them and make some. How does this compare to that pre-made seasoned salt Lawry's? Is that the one?
Yeah, and Lawry's is good, and it's but this is again, this is something that I like to make because I like it a certain taste.
It has your own touch.
Yep.
Well, Kevin has shown us the secrets in his kitchen. It's almost like a mad scientist lab. It's one step beyond salt. It's his special seasoned salt that we're working with today on Cavalcade of Food.
So, you know what? For those of you who wanted to see how we made our seasoned salt, here it is. You can see. Hope you give it a try. We had a great time putting this little batch together. Hope you had a good time being with us.
I did.
And we will see you next time right here on
Cavalcade of Food.
Bye.